All right, for this job right here, this is off of, I do believe it's Honda, like a GCX or 160, whatever, carburetor. They're pretty common. And after you get it off, you should have like this sort of manifold gasket. Make note of how this goes back on. So you want to make sure to have those ports open, like right there. There's a little cutaway, and it only kind of like fits on there right one way. So, just make note of that. And you need about a 10 millimeter to get to this bowl nut, and a couple screwdrivers that will work to take the jet out of the bottom. So with your 10 millimeter, your socket or your wrench, go ahead and take the bowl off. Oh, also you're going to need some kind of wire from either a wire brush, or if you got a braided steel cable. We're going to take a little chunk off of this in a minute. But if you go ahead and take off your bowl nut, okay, recommend having your parts kind of laid out in the order that you take them off if you need to. Take the bowl off, inspect it, make sure it doesn't have a bunch of crap in it. And then the float comes out pretty easy usually, unless there's some contamination, and this might be a challenge. You might want to go ahead, if it is stuck real tight, take some PB Blaster or whatever, WD-40, get it on there. You might have to put it in a vise possibly, being careful not to booger up the surfaces here. I like to put rags around it, or put some wood on either side of the carburetor. Make sure you don't mess up this butterfly, turn this butterfly before you do that. Put it in a vise, all right? Or you might bend that thing and put it in a vise, and then maybe grab it. This is after you put some WD-40 on there at PB Blaster, and then go ahead and pull it out. But a lot of times, like in this case, it just came right out of there. It's no big deal. And then take your float out, and this one does have a spring underneath. Check the condition of the needle right there. That rubber needle looks good. Set that to the side. Look down in the seat. That looks nice and clean. I just got done cleaning this out, but I figured I kind of always wanted to do a tutorial on this. Now, down in here is the jet. That's the main jet right there, okay? And it's got a slot in it for a screwdriver. Now, you want to make sure that the screwdriver you're using is going to fit as perfectly as possible into that slot for the main jet. So get it in there. You don't want it really even touching the threads. I like to use one that's just a little bit smaller, so I'm not boogering up the threads on the inside there. So I used a little bit smaller one, and it came out pretty easily for me. So we got the jet out, coming out here. Jet. Sometimes they get hung up like right here, and they can be a booger to get out. They'll just barely come out, and you can't shake them out, can't do anything. You just got to keep shaking it. Pour some PB Blaster in there, get it to come out. Okay, put that to the side. And now down in here is the emulsion tube. Do you see that tube right down in there? Okay, and it is right there. See that tube right there? If that's not just shaking out, you can tap it a couple times. Tap, tap, tap on the table. If it doesn't come out, reach down in there with your screwdriver and just kind of push it down. Push it down. Okay. And get it to come down. And then maybe tap it a couple times to get it to come out. Okay. And there's your emulsion tube. Now, when you're going to clean this out, okay, look at all these holes. Okay. Can you count them? 1, 2, 3, and then there's 2 more little ones right there. That's 5, and then there's another 3 and a 6. Okay, that's 11 times 2, so that's 22 small holes just on the inner part of this. Then you have another 23, 24, 25, 26 holes just on this emulsion tube. If this thing isn't idling good, if it's not running good, like in the case of this motor, it would not run with the choke off. So I had to run it with choke on, meaning it's not getting enough fuel. So I wanted to make sure that all of those little holes were clear. And what I do is I'll take a wire brush, or in the case of this here, a braided steel cable, and I'll take one strand off of this thing and make it so it's real super skinny. Okay, and I'll go ahead and take diagonal cutters, some kind of cutter, snip that off. Now I got a piece, and that will get into every one of those holes that I just pointed out, even the small ones. Okay, so you want to poke all the way through, or poke into all of them. And after that's done, I'll go ahead and blow it out with compressed air. Also want to poke through the main jet and make sure it's nice and clear, and then blow through that with compressed air. Okay, when you're done. All right, now sometimes this emulsion tube gets caught up inside of here. I'm just going to put this back together for demonstration purposes. Now I went ahead and put that main jet back in there, and sometimes you can get the jet out, but then the emulsion tube sticks. And by the way, when you're, remember I said using a little bit smaller diameter screwdriver, so you're not hitting the threads, the inner threads of that tube right here. Okay, if you do booger them up, like sometimes you might get this thing halfway out when you're loosening it, and then if your screwdriver's too big, it's going to be digging in any of these threads, and it's just going to get your main jet totally stuck in there, and basically you ruin the carburetor. All right, so make sure that when you get it down in there, get a good bite on your thread, get a good bite on the slot of the main jet, and push real hard as you're turning, super hard. Try not to strip that slot in the main jet. And if it's not coming, it's not coming. Okay, so the best you can do is try to get that wire, stick it down into your, in through your jet the best you can, and clean it out. Okay. And then also another thing I do is I'll take a longer strand of wire. Okay, let's say I did get the jet out. All right, I will take a longer strand of wire, and I'll bring it up through that emulsion tube, and I will fish it out. You know, like this is like maybe a foot long piece of strand of wire. Okay, up through the emulsion tube. This is if I can't get that emulsion tube out that had the 24 holes in it. Put that wire up through there, fish it through, snake it through the top of the emulsion tube, and get a small needle nose plier and pull it out through the top. I will tie a knot in it, a couple knots, okay, and then I'll pull it back through here, and that knot will catch on top of that emulsion tube right there in the background behind the butterfly valve. Okay, it'll get back there, it'll get on top of the emulsion tube right there, see? And when you pull it, it'll get stuck, and hopefully it will pull out your emulsion tube. That's a little trick. So hopefully that makes sense. Another thing I didn't mention about, then you're going to go ahead, you can take your gasket off here. I would recommend taking your bowl gasket off here, setting that to the side. I'm leaving this on here now because I've already cleaned this up. But before you spray it down with any carburetor cleaner, I would take this bowl gasket off, because that carburetor cleaner, a lot of times it just causes this to swell up. It becomes too big, and then you just ruined it. So the carburetor cleaner, you got to be careful with the rubber pieces. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take this part off. I make note this is screwed in here, okay, and this is kind of the stop, okay, for the throttle right here, the throttle butterfly. So I'm going to take this out, make a note of how far that's stuck out on the other side.